Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or The Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my tiered wide receiver rankings for week number 7 of the 2022 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. And if you have any questions about week number 7, please let me know down below in the comment section. I love to talk to you guys down there. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 7 wide receiver tiered rankings. We begin with tier number 1 at the wide receiver position with Ja'Marr Chase of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Atlanta Falcons this week at home in Cincinnati. Now, outside of week number 1, where this guy danced all over the Pittsburgh Steelers defense as a top 5 wide receiver in half PPR, things did not look great for Ja'Marr Chase. After that, wide receiver 44 in half PPR, 41, 28, and 39. Now, last week up against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans, the quote-unquote homecoming game for LSU legend Ja'Marr Chase, he has 7 receptions, 10 targets, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns, 29 half PPR points, and he's the number 1 wide receiver at the end of the week. So things are looking great for Ja'Marr Chase. This week, he faces the Atlanta Falcons, who look good defensively against the rushing attack of the 49ers, but we saw Brandon Ayuk go balls deep into that defense. So I think Ja'Marr Chase puts up yet another excellent performance, and he is my number 1 receiver on the week, and I would be shocked if he finished outside of the top 3. Next up, we move to Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins in prime time up against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football. Now, despite the fact that Tua Tagovailoa missed the last 2 games and basically missed all of that game up against the Bengals, in 2 of 3 games in half PPR, Tyreek Hill was still a top 5 wide receiver. Tua Tagovailoa was slinging the rock all over the yard when he was healthy. I think this is a very big game for Tyreek Hill. He leads the league in receiving yards. I think he's in for a humongous showing here up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is currently the wide receiver number 4 in half PPR, and I think he belongs in tier number 1 at the wide receiver position. To close out tier number 1, before we move into tier number 2, is Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Houston Texans. Now, Davante Adams obviously shoved that cameraman after that week 5 loss up against the Kansas City Chiefs, but that wasn't his only highlight, because the guy scored 2 touchdowns in that game and finished as the wide receiver number 2, coming off of the bye week, going up against a putrid Houston Texans defense. I love Davante Adams in this spot. Next up, we move to wide receiver 2, beginning with CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, this week going toe-to-toe with the Detroit Lions, who are the worst defense in the NFL. The defense is so bad that they had a bye week last week, and that defense still allows the most amount of points in the NFL. It's basically like they lost to the bye week, which is fucking hilarious. So CeeDee Lamb gets his kind of, not necessarily a homecoming game here up against the Lions, but he gets his guy back. He gets his quarterback back, Dak Prescott, and I am now incredibly confident that CeeDee Lamb is going to have a smash spot in this game. I did kind of think about potentially ranking him inside of tier number 1, but I think those guys are just slightly better than him in terms of projections for this week. This could be a very big game, though, for CeeDee Lamb. He's currently the wide receiver 13 in half PPR on the season, but I think he has his best performance yet this week up against a not-so-hot Lions defense. At number 5, we have Mr. Jalen Waddle away, waddle, waddle, till the very next day, bump, 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 bada, bum, up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, last week, some people point the finger at Jamal Williams because he did fumble away the game at the end of the game up against the Minnesota Vikings, but it is what it is, because even during that game with Skylar Thompson playing and then Teddy having to come in, Jalen Waddle still had 10 targets, 6 receptions, 129 receiving yards, 14 half PPR points, and was the wide receiver number 16. His best games this season were with Tua Tagovailoa under center. This Pittsburgh Steelers defense is not the same at all without TJ Watt. I know they beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers basically beat themselves. I think that Jalen Waddle has a big game here with Tua coming back. He currently ranks wide receiver 7 in half PPR on the season, and I know it is kind of tough to have 2 guys on the exact same team ranked inside the top 10, but with how good Tua looked prior to him getting hurt, I really think both Jalen and Tyreek could finish inside of the top 10 in half PPR. Next up, we move to wide receiver Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Carolina Panthers. Now, I know I did kind of just dance on the grave of old man Tom Brady, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This week, they get the Carolina Carolina Panthers. So I know they shit the bed in an easy matchup, a get-right game up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if they fail in this game up against the Carolina Panthers, you might as well wave the season bye-bye to the Buccaneers. Now, probably not, because their division isn't very good, and they'll probably still make the playoffs because the NFC isn't the best. But at the end of the day, this is a big bounce-back game for Mike Evans. We've seen the upside this guy has. Just a couple of weeks ago, he was the wide receiver #1 up against the Kansas City Chiefs. He could potentially repeat that up against the Carolina Panthers. I'm not overwhelmingly panicking about Tom Brady yet, but if this is a bad game, then man, oh man, am I going to be very nervous. At number 7, we have Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. Now, he did end up missing week number 4 and came back for week number 5 prior to their bye in week number 6. In that game, he played up against the Patriots and didn't do very good, but going into the game, we kind of knew that Amon-Ra St. Brown's usage would be lower. That was the least amount of targets he has seen all year. Now, I know some people might panic because the Cowboys defense has looked decent, but while Trayvon Diggs loves getting interceptions, and it's pretty clear that Trayvon Diggs is going to be on Amon-Ra St. Brown, Trayvon Diggs also allows a ass load of yards onto his head top. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, this offense has just been firing at all cylinders outside that game up against the Patriots. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown bounces back in this game and finishes inside of the top 10. To close out the tier number 2, we have DeAndre Hopkins of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the New Orleans Saints tonight on Thursday Night Football. Now, without Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins returns to be the clear #1 wide receiver. Now, I still think he would have seen a shit ton of targets in this game, even if Hollywood Brown was healthy. But now, without a reasonable doubt, DeAndre Hopkins will be the guy. The Saints defense does look decent at times, but this whole team is incredibly banged up. Marshawn Lattimore does not seem like he's going to play tonight. I think DeAndre Hopkins could have a smash spot, and hopefully for the Arizona Cardinals, D-Hop returning turns things around, because things aren't looking the best for the Arizona Cardinals. Tier number 3 begins with Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I kept making fun of Deebo Samuel because he was just playing all right. Wide receiver 28, 25, 39. And then after I made fun of him, the guy went absolutely fucking nuclear up against the LA Rams. He hit me with that backhand slap, Will Smith style, and basically laughed directly at me. But after that, he went back to his same old bullshit. Wide receiver 26 and 22. Now, I know Deebo Samuel has that top 10 receiver in him. He has that dog in him. And I have him ranked inside of the top 10. But just so you guys are aware, I know this matchup could be huge against the Chiefs. This could be a high-scoring, tit-for-tat affair. This is a Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago. Deebo might have a good game, but I want to reiterate that I find it hard to rank him higher based upon his performances this season, because he's only cracked the top 24 wide receivers in half PPR twice on the year. At number 10, we have Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts. Now, to start off the season, this guy was on fire, NBA Jam style, top 5 wide receiver, and then he got banged up, and then after that, things weren't the best for Michael Pittman. But last week, up against the Jaguars, 16 fucking targets, 13 receptions, 134 receiving yards, 20 fantasy points, wide receiver number 6 in half PPR. It appears that maybe Matt Ryan's got his swagger back. That was by far his best game in an Indianapolis Colts uniform. And honestly, that's the best I've seen Matt Ryan play in what feels like years at this point. I think that Michael Pittman is in for another solid spot up against the Titans defense. The Titans defense doesn't really scare me too much, but I'm not going to go here and say they're dog shit, because they're slightly better than that. At number 11, we have Mike Williams. Now, last week, Mike Williams basically spit roasted your roster. 6 targets, 2 receptions, 17 receiving yards, 3 fantasy points, and wide receiver number 68. 1 off of being wide receiver 69. Very nice. I like. Now, that Denver corner, Surtain, absolutely put this motherfucker in a box and locked away the key. Now, I do still believe, now I don't know what you guys think, but I still think that that was a catch that he made with the toe tap. I still think that was a catch, but it didn't count as one. But this week he gets the Seahawks. Keenan Allen is giving reports last night, which basically seems like he might want to rest again. Motherfucker, you've been resting all season. You've been resting all season, but he might miss again. The Seattle Seahawks defense just allows trains to be ran on him. Justin Herbert, the pervert, has a bad game in week 6. The Denver Broncos defense is legit. The Seattle Seahawks defense is the exact opposite. I think Mike Williams bounces back. This guy every single week is very unpredictable. His upside is literally a top 5 wide receiver. His downside is week number 1, where he scores 2 fucking points and he's the wide receiver 102. But I think this week we see a bounce back game out of Mike Williams. At number 12, speaking of the Seattle Seahawks, we have DK Metcalf of the Seahawks going up against the LA Superchargers in LA. Now, prior to last week, he had 3 straight games inside the top 20 in half PPR. Last week up against the Cardinals, that game was just messy all around. The Cardinals did not show up. The Seahawks ultimately win the game, but Geno doesn't necessarily cook like Geno was cooking. Geno was cooking up some 5-star Michelin chef Gordon Ramsay level meals from weeks 3 to 5. Last week, he doesn't play bad. He wasn't awful, but he didn't look as good. The Chargers offense could be incredibly good. They could be incredibly explosive, which is going to cause the Seattle Seahawks to have to be throwing late in the game. And if Geno keeps playing at the same level, he gets back to how he was playing the last couple of weeks, then DK Metcalf really could be a top 12 wide receiver. I feel incredibly wrong about DK Metcalf because honestly, I didn't like him a ton going into the season. At number 13, we have Mr. T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, entering last week, I was as nervous as it gets. I was fucking petrified. I was shaking in my boots because I felt like, you know, week number 5 up against the Ravens in prime time, T. Higgins played, but he didn't really play. And then they activate him in week 6, and my worries is, hey, he's going up against the Saints. Maybe they do the same thing. Maybe they activate him, but he scores like 0 points. Now, he ended up scoring 8 points. So if you benched him under my advice, you didn't get burned by him. He was wide receiver 41, but he definitely did look more healthy than I thought he would. And now he's another week off the injury and playing the Falcons defense. And while I do have Jamar Chase ranked number 1, this team really has a 1A and 1B wide receiver situation. It's not like Jamar Chase is wildly above T. Higgins in terms of target share. And early on in the season, it looked like T. Higgins was the number 1, the 1A guy there. So against the Falcons, I think we see a pretty solid showing out of my boy, Titty Boy, T. Higgins. But before we pivot into wide receiver 15 and then move to tier number 4 at the wide receiver position, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor of today's video, BetMGM. They've been on your screen this whole entire video. If you bet $10, you will win $200 in free bets if any team in the NHL scores a goal tonight. Now, you have to be a first-time BetMGM user, and you can only bet on the money line. So bet on any NHL game, and if a single goal is scored tonight, you will receive $200 in free bets. It doesn't get easier than that. You want to take advantage of this because this offer isn't going to last forever, and sportsbooks don't love giving out free money, and they're giving you basically $10, you deposit, you bet on the money line, someone's going to score a goal, and then you just get $200 in free bets. So even if you don't like the NHL, you can start using those free bets on the NFL, MLB in the playoffs, NBA. I assume you like the NFL, so in the NFL. So, make sure you guys check that out. The link is in the video description. Again, you have to be a first-time BetMGM user. You can only bet on the money line, but all you got to do is bet $10 on a money line pre-game bet in the NHL, and you will receive $200 if any team scores tonight, which is a lock. So make sure you guys do check that out. Back on into things. Next up, we move to Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Carolina Panthers. Now, I do kind of see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense, when it's running correctly, a lot like the Cincinnati Bengals. It's not like Mike Evans is clearly the number 1 receiver there. They're 1A and 1B in this offense. Now, again, if they suck ass against the Panthers, if they end up sputtering out and fucking exploding, blowing up in this game, then you know what to do with the Bucs. You have to be significantly more cautious, and I'm going to have to rank them a lot lower. Now, Chris Godwin hasn't had a huge game this season, but he's seen over 10 targets already twice through 4 games this season. He missed weeks 2 and weeks number 3. This week, he gets the Panthers. Again, this is a get-right game for the team, so I'm going to believe in Chris Godwin in this spot. At number 15, we have my boy Tyler Lockett in my pocket. Skirt of the Seattle Seahawks going up against the LA A Superchargers. Now, again, just like with Metcalf, last week up against the Arizona Cardinals was certainly a down game for Tyler Lockett. 5 targets, 2 receptions, 17 receiving yards, 3 fantasy points, wide receiver number 67. But again, that game was just a complete and utter fucking dumpster fire disaster. This week, they get the Chargers, again, in a game that I think could be incredibly high scoring, a back and forth affair, which will help out Tyler Lockett a ton. Now, I do feel like he is on the brink of falling into tier number 4. Like, he's very close. He's right on the edge. Like, when the fucking guy and the girl in the Titanic are hanging off the edge, you know what I'm talking about? That is where Tyler Lockett is. So if you said, oh, Nick, I got him ranked in tier 4, I wouldn't judge you for that. Now we move to tier number 5, headlined by Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars, going up against the New York Football Giants. Now, a lot of people started to panic heavily on Christian Kirk because in weeks 4 and 5, despite the fact that he was a top 20 wide receiver in week 1, 2, and 3, they started to panic. Last week, he was the wide receiver 36, but he saw more targets, and he also scored a touchdown in that game. Now, the Giants' defense has looked good. And it seems like Christian Kirk hasn't fallen out of favor in this offense, but hasn't been getting peppered with targets like he was early on in the season. I still think you have to rank Christian Kirk highly because when this Jaguars offense is on, they are incredibly good and hard to stop. The Giants defense has looked good. They shut down Aaron Rodgers last week, but I think Christian Kirk will still be able to get it done this week because the volume will continue to go up. He right now is the wide receiver 12 in half PPR. Next up, we move to Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Now, the Baltimore Ravens continue to week in and week out disappoint every single fucking game. They're winning the game by a zillion, and then by the end of the game, they end up choking things away, right? That defense is soft as baby shit. Amari Cooper's been a top 24 wide receiver in back-to-back weeks. He's been a top 24 wide receiver in 4 of 6 games on the season. He's been pretty boomer bust because when he's good, he's a top 12 guy. When he's bad, he's close to wide receiver number 84, but he's been seeing a bunch of targets, 12 last week and 12 the week prior. I think he gets close to 12 targets this week. I think this is going to potentially be a close divisional matchup between the Ravens. Again, the Ravens defense isn't the best against the pass, and Jacoby Brissett has been cooking. Amari Cooper is a top 12 wide receiver right now in half PPR, and I'm going to continue to rely on him. At number 18, we have Chris Olave, and this does feel a little bit low, if I'm being honest with you guys, where I have him ranked. Jameis Winston might be healthy, he might not be healthy. This is something to monitor as we get later on into the day before they play tonight. Make sure you guys check out my fantasy football Thursday Night Football live stream at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will be talking through this, but Chris Olave's quarterback, I think it's going to be Jameis, but it might be the Red Rifle. Who knows how healthy Jameis is? That does kind of sway me slightly on Chris Olave. When he has been playing, though, he missed last week with that concussion. Top 18 wide receiver in week 5, 4, and 3. To start off the season, things weren't the best, but now Michael Thomas isn't there. Jarvis Landry isn't there. Everyone's fucking hurt in New Orleans. That leaves a wide open door for Chris Olave to have a very solid performance. Again, 18 feels a little low. Expert consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros has him as wide receiver 22, so I'm slightly higher than that, but I still do feel a little low on him. I do think he has a solid game. I just do worry about the quarterback play. To close out tier number 4, we got Jacoby Myers of the New England Deflatriots going up against the Chicago Bears on Monday Night Football. Now, last week with Bailey Zappi, the Zappinator, Jacoby Myers only saw 4 targets, going 4 for 4, like he was at Wendy's for 60 yards. Now, the Zappinator, Bailey Zappi, was kind of just evenly distributing the ball. He wasn't just force-feeding it to any given wide receiver, which does somewhat worry me about Jacoby Myers' target total, but they should just dog the shit out of the Bears, right? The Bears don't stand much of a chance in this game, and one bad game doesn't scare me away from Jacoby Myers, who could end up being a target hog in this matchup. Next up, we move to tier number 5, and this is where things start to get much more risky, right? Courtland Sutton is an excellent wide receiver. I won't dispute that. I was a huge fan banging the drum of Courtland Sutton early on in the season. But now we're in week 7, and Russell Wilson makes me incredibly disappointed. Russell Wilson looks awful, and that's why Courtland Sutton is hard to trust. He only saw 3 targets last week up against the LA Chargers. Russell Wilson in the first quarter of the game versus the second, third, and fourth quarter looked like a completely different man. It looked like Russell Wilson hopped in the time machine and was playing like Seattle Russell Wilson, and then all the effects of the time machine wore off in the second quarter, and he started playing like shit. Now, I understand the Jets defense has looked good, but I'm still going to believe in this guy because of how talented he is, but it starts to feel gross in this range because right now, there's a big red flag above Courtland Sutton, and that flag's name is Russell Wilson, Mr. Unlimited. At number 21, we have Allen Lazard of the Green Bay Packers going up against the Commanders in Washington. Now, despite the fact that that the Jets ended up beating the Green Bay Packers, Allen Lazard was still a top 10 wide receiver in that game and has been a top 24 wide receiver through the past 3 weeks. We have to continue to adapt our rankings based upon how these guys perform and based upon the matchup. The Commanders matchup is amazing. I understand all the Commanders defense look good against the Bears. That's because they're the fucking Bears. The Bears. The Packers, I know they don't look great against the Jets, but now they're playing the Commanders. Okay, this is an incredibly easy matchup for Lazard, who took advantage of the Jets defense last week. 9 targets, 4 receptions, 76 receiving yards, and a touchdown. In 4 of 5 games, he scored a touchdown this season. I like him a lot up against the Commanders. At number 22, we got Deontay Johnson. Now, Deontay Johnson's ranking does not at all have anything to do with whether Kenny Pickett or Kissin Titties Mitchell Trubisky plays. I would slightly prefer Deontay Johnson with Trubisky, but it doesn't shift the pendulum a lot. Who it does shift the pendulum on is George Pickens, who's not in the rankings, because if Kenny Pickett is locked and loaded in, then I move Pickens up the rankings because it just seems like Pickett wants to force feed him the ball. Mitch Trubisky, like when he goes to look at him, he's like Stevie Wonder. He can't fucking see him. So Deontay Johnson hasn't really lived up to my expectations. He hasn't necessarily been a bust, but if he puts up another wide receiver game outside of the top 30, then he is going to be considered a bust in my book. At number 23, to close out tier number 5, we have Juju Smith-Schuster, Mr. Corvette of the Kansas City Chiefs, going up against the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco. Now, if this was the beginning of the season, I would be nervous for Juju Smith-Schuster because the 49ers defense going into the season looked fierce. They looked ferocious. They looked incredible. But guess what? Now we're in week number 7, and the injury wave hit them like a fucking truck, like a monster truck. It rolled over them, and then they backed up, said, back it up, and they backed their ass up right over the fucking 49ers again. They are completely banged up on defense. Juju just came off his best game of the season with a touchdown and over 100 yards. Now, Pat Mahomes does throw the ball around a decent amount, so I wouldn't be surprised if Juju ended up being not so hot this week, but he's on a hot streak. He looked good. He looked like the most reliable receiver on the team outside of Travis Kelce. So I think we might start seeing a little bit more of Juju in this offense. Now, to close things out, we got tier number 6, headlined by Keenan Allen. Now, obviously, I haven't talked the most positive about Keenan Allen. It doesn't seem like it's a lock that Keenan Allen is going to play. Now, he is expected to practice this week based upon what I've read from Brandon Staley, head coach of the team. But even if he does practice, we got to monitor up until Sunday because he might just say, nope, we got the bye next week in week 8. Let me miss another game. And that would be a kick directly in the penis of everyone who drafted him. And I guess in the vagina as well, if you're a female and you drafted him. We have about 2.5% female viewership. So shout out to the females watching these videos as well. At number 25, we have Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commanders going up against the Green Bay Packers. Now this year with Carson Wentz, it's kind of the same old shit with Terry McLaurin. The guy's really an incredible player. He has all of this upside. He's got that dog in him, but he has a quarterback that continues to sell everything. Now, I understand Taylor Heineke isn't the second coming of Patrick Mahomes, but at least with Taylor Heineke, he does this thing called the fuck it, Terry McLaurin's out there somewhere. So regardless of the fact that there's 3 human beings around Terry McLaurin, Taylor Heineke's gonna cock back and throw a fucking missile deep down the field to Terry McLaurin. It might be a pick, but it also might be a 60-yard fucking bomb, okay? Taylor Heineke at least gives a little bit of pizzazz to Terry McLaurin. He was like the most boring thing ever with Carson Wentz. He was like missionary sex. And now with Taylor Heineke, we're doing some fucking wheelbarrow position with Terry McLaurin. I'm very excited for what could be a huge game in week numero 7. Again, I'm not being too out there. I'm not being overwhelmingly confident. I just think this is the best spot McLaurin's in, and the Packers defense didn't do too well last week. At number 26, we have Drizzy, Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. This guy started off the year on fire, NBA Jam style, but recently he has pittered off. I think that's the term. I try using that word in like every video, and to me, it's like some SAT caliber word, even though it's something easy that everyone knows how to say. But for some reason, I can't say it. With that said, though, Drizzy Drake London going up against the Bengals in Cincinnati. That defense hasn't looked the best. The Red Rifle played quite good up against them last week. Mariota doesn't pass the ball a lot, which is the worst part about London. And if they continue to use Pitts more, then that's worrisome for Drake London as well. But we've seen this tale already once in the season where Pitts has some good numbers, and then after that, he fades away and doesn't do much. So I'm going to fire up Drake London this week, not with as much confidence as normal. This range, I'm not super confident in these guys, but again, you still kind of have to play them. At number 27, we have Rondale Moore of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the New Orleans Saints. Now, Rondale Moore, despite me wanting to play him last 3 games when he's returned from injury, he has yet to be a top 24 receiver. He's been wide receiver 83, 31, and 39 in the last 3 weeks. Now, he did see 10 targets in week 6 against Seattle, 8 targets in week 5 up against the Eagles, so there is promise for him. And again, maybe just putting DeAndre Hopkins back in this offense magically changes everything, and magically they look great. I hope that's the case. I think Rondale Moore is a good player, but they still have Dulcich. They still have AJ Green. They still have Zach Ertz. They still have these other pieces to throw the ball to, which does concern me. But at the end of the day, this game, if it wasn't on Thursday, it'd probably be high scoring. It'll probably end up being a snooze fest because it's on Thursday Night Football. But I still think Rondale Moore is an incredibly interesting waiver wire pickup that you should be starting this week. At 38, we have Brandon Ayuk. Now, just like Deebo Samuel, I've been dancing on the grave of Brandon Ayuk. I've been saying, oh my gosh, everyone drafted him so highly. I liked him in the draft. The guy sucked ass. Wide receiver 60, 42, 33, 55, 46. Then last week, he's the wide receiver 3. He spits directly on my face, and it hurt. It hurt because even in the live stream prior to the game, I was shit talking him. I'm like, oh my God, why do you guys want to start Brandon Ayuk? He hasn't done anything. And then he has a big game. So I'm fine starting him this week. Again, the matchup up against the Chiefs seems very enticing. But am I calling this guy a must-start wide receiver? Fuck no, baby. At number 29, we have Alec Pierce of the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Les Titans. Now, we have continued to see as the season has prolonged that Alec Pierce continues to be ramped up in terms of targets in the offense. He had 7 targets in week 6, 9 targets in week 5, and 6 targets in week number 4. He scored his first ever NFL touchdown last week against the Jaguars, 3 receptions on 7 targets for 49 yards and a touchdown, 12 fantasy points, wide receiver 23 on the week. He's been a top 24 wide receiver in both of his last 2 games. The Titans defense, again, I talked earlier, I'm not going to shit on them. They're not the best. They're not the worst. They're just pretty meh. And Matt Ryan was cooking up. Matt Ryan was looking good last week. I think we might be in for another solid Alec Pierce performance. And then at 30, right after 30 is where things start to get even more kind of nerve-wracking. So 30 is Jerry Jeudy of the Broncos going up against the Jets. Behind him, we got Curtis Samuel, Brandon Cooks, Romeo Dubes, Tyler Boyd, all guys that you can almost shove into this tier as well. Jerry Jeudy got a buttload, and I said ass load so many times in this video. He got a lofty amount of targets last week, 7, but for 3 receptions, 54 yards, 7 fantasy points. He has fallen outside the top 50 wide receivers in fantasy this year. 1, 2, 3 of 6 games. 3 of 6 games outside the top 50. Now, again, I'm still playing him, but am I confident with Russell Wilson? No, I'm not confident at all. And it sucks because going into the season, you would have thought that this Broncos team would be on top of the world. But now we're in week 7. We're in week 7. How many more tries can we give Russell Wilson? It's not prime time. Maybe he steps up because it's not a prime time game. But man, oh man, am I nervous. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. Let me know down below in the comment section if you enjoyed today's format of it being a tier-based ranking instead of just rankings 1 through 30. So let me know down below in the comment section. I love you guys all so much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your guys' day. Again, make sure you check out BetMGM. Click on the link in the video description if you are a new user on BetMGM. If you bet $10 on any NHL game tonight on the money line, you'll receive $200 in free bets. It's a no-brainer. You got to make sure you take advantage before it's gone. I love you guys so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.